Which commissioners do we have on the call right now? Diane is here.
Sean Primer and
Sean.
you.
All right, very good. Well, welcome, and thank you everyone else for joining us. As Eric said, we'll skip the approval of the meetings for now. We'll table that until we have a quorum. For chair comments, I'll just keep it very brief, also in the interest of time. If anyone has had the opportunity to see the work done on the bridge near the Truman Library, I encourage you to go take a look at that. There's a bike lane there now, and they've done some work near the McCoy Park, including some work on that island right there. And so that approach into the Truman Library is vastly improved. It looks very nice, and appreciate Eric's work on that committee. And I just kind of taking a look at parks in general, as we're all kind of pressed to keep the parks looking nice and to keep people off of it in the interest of not spreading the virus, it seems. And I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about this if we could, but it seems like some of that fencing has been staying up. I know it's probably been tough to keep people away from the playgrounds and such, but been pleased at seeing what seems to me like a little bit better distance from that space has been intended by the parks staff.
Yeah, we will. If it's okay, we'll let Mike Hicks cover that out when he does his summary report for parks. I think he'll be teed up to tell you all about that.
All right, awesome. Well, let's move on to the director's report.
All right, Tamara, if you don't mind, could we see the agenda, please?
Bear with me, that is not it. Give me just a second. I'm not liking to pull up the PDF.
And while that's being pulled up, just a reminder to everyone that this is being live streamed and it is on City 7. And we also are under a bit of a timeline today, so we're going to try to do our best to keep this within an hour. We will lose our live streaming window here in about an hour and 15 minutes or so. We're not the only thing on the lineup tonight, so this is our time, and then we'll get bumped for a following meeting shortly after ours wraps up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism overall status. So I asked two of our managers to be online to talk us through both the park status as well as the recreation status. Then I'll cover the tourism site status. So let's start with
Eric, just so you know, Roger finally got on.
Oh, good, Roger.
Bye.
Thank you, Roger. We'll circle back and do the approval of the minutes here towards the end of the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you, Roger.
I'm only on by phone.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so let's turn it over to Mike Hicks for a little bit here, and let Mike, if you could give us a summary of the park status and tell us a little bit about what's going on out in the parks, please.
Okay. Well, out in the parks, we're still dealing with a lot of homeless. Just in this quarter, we've had to remove 21 camps, and it was kind of a struggle because the police couldn't really do much with them as far as worried about spreading COVID and stuff. But we did manage to get 21 camps out of there. We've had 64 graffiti incidents over the restrooms, outside the restrooms in a quarter, which is it's actually up a little bit. That with the 46 vandalisms. We've had a struggle keeping up with the grass this year, not to mention from the rain, but we've had to pull guys off because of this fencing on the playgrounds. And a lot of these playgrounds, they're having to reset fencing on average 3 times a day, and then people are bound and determined to get on the playground, so then they start chopping up the fencing. So then we start getting into the replacing part. So I mean that's it's an ongoing effort, but it's not a battle that we're winning by any means. Because it's just so hard to keep people off of them. And I mean, I get it. They're bound up at home and they want their kids to do something, but so, and you know, part of this mowing problem that we've had, when we had to cut our budget because of all this COVID, we ended up losing all of our contractors, which helped us out in the mowing, the landscaping, and treatments. We were unable to bring any seasonals in, so our staff was cut down dramatically, and we rely on both them for everything we do. So we were trying to, you know, keep up with the fencing and the graffiti and the homeless, and plus do the mowing with a lot less staff to do it. So it's been a real struggle. You know, we're just now starting to get where we can bring some of the contracting back, and which would be a help. And I think they've got 3 seasonals hired. I think it's 3. So we're still going to bring a couple more of them in, which we're starting to gain ground now, slowly, but we are getting there. You know, we did manage to put in a Fairmount pad out there. We had people complaining before that there wasn't really nothing close to the playground up there for them. So we put a pad in and put a barbecue grill and picnic tables and got all that done. And everything else, our maintenance guys, they just been doing all the general facility problems that we run into every day. You know, changing filters, lights, you know, plumbing, the everyday occurrences, especially in the restrooms now that they're open. So I think that's pretty much everything we got going.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Yeah, it has been a very challenging spring and early summer season for sure. As Mike indicated, the budget was reduced as a result of less revenue coming in. We will talk about that when we get to the budget discussion here in the next bullet point. So I guess what we ask for from a parks perspective is your patience. The crews are trying their best, and as Mike said, we're starting to make a little bit of headway here. We're starting to get caught up a little bit, and we do have some outside assistance that we've been able to employ back with contractors and a few seasonals, and that'll certainly help. But it's going to take us a little bit more time to get things back where they should be. But we're making gains for sure. So thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Any questions for Mike Hicks, our park manager?
This is Roger. I'll just say I was at George Owen today for the first time, and it looked pretty good down by the lake. It was mowed, and there were people showing up to go fishing, and I was surprised. I thought you'd be further behind on that than you were. So just a kudos there on that. That park down by the pond, down by the lake, looked better than I really expected it would. And there was a whole group of people headed down there with fishing gear. So.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. That park has seen a resurgence of patrons. That's been a very popular park through this pandemic scenario. Their numbers are up. Okay, let's talk. Let's hear from Jody Wynn. Jody is our recreation manager. She's going to talk about summary status for our recreation facilities.
Hello. I was just going to add to that. Yeah, I talked to Jeff earlier today, and they're seeing a lot of new faces out at George Owens, and they're getting ready to start their Hummingbird Festival. So they're looking forward to that and trying to figure how they can transition that to an event where they can allow for social distancing. And so watch for that. That ought to be fun. So George Owens had, what?
They were out filling those feeders while we were there.
Yeah, they're already working on it. They're starting to show up. So I think he said the last week of August, first week of September is when they look to have the largest population out there. So yeah, it's always fun. They posted a picture on Facebook of some banding that they did out there. So it's just a tiny little hummingbird. It was really cute. Let me see. So they had a little over 1,200 people that went through the park in July. So their attendance really is up. Eric's right. Families are looking for places where they can get out and enjoy themselves without having to to subject themselves to any other people, I guess, where they can do social distancing and enjoy nature. The Palmer Center is still closed for people to come in and use it, but they have delivered in July 2,160 meals to the people. These are people that used to come into the center. They get frozen meals enough to last them for 2 weeks. So they go out every other week and deliver those to the people in their homes. And they've made over 900 calls to make sure that people are doing well. The Sermon Center and Truman Memorial Building have opened back up. They're offering classes. The Sermon Center, of course, has the workout areas, and the traffic is down, but there are people coming in to work out. And we also have a few clubs that if they can observe social distancing, we've allowed them to start in both the Sermon Center and the Truman Memorial Building. The Farmers Market has been going on at the Independence Uptown Market since May. We are now doing a walk where people can walk up and shop. And in July, we had over 1,200 people that came up and were able to get some fresh produce and have access to that for their homes. Of course, at all the centers, we're doing temp checks and masks are required. And staff is just working through all that. But I think we've done pretty well so far.
Any projection on when the Palmer Center will open?
Do you want to talk to that, Eric?
Go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say, Mark, Mid-America Regional Council, who funds the meal program, is fine with them staying with the frozen meals until the cases of COVID have dropped significantly. As far as the Palmer Center itself, we have not made any determination on that. Again, it will be determined by the number of cases that if they drop or not.
Yeah, we're really following suit with the Mid-America Regional Council's advice on reopening the centers that they support financially through some grant program. And we're also keeping in contact with our other senior center friends around the area so that hopefully when everyone's ready, we'll be able to open in concert with one another and basically get those services back online. But it's going to be at least another month or two, I'm afraid. Okay. All right, let me talk a little bit about tourism. Tourism sites are closed for the season for a couple of different reasons. One is the workforce that we have that really operate those facilities, from the docents to the folks that are organizing events and things of that nature there, are primarily volunteers that are in an classification that is at risk with COVID. Many of those were not comfortable coming back, and the city has agreed with that for their safety. So staffing was an issue if we wanted to be open at this point in time. So we're remaining closed for that reason. And the other is for budget. As we'll get into here in a little bit, the transient guest tax is, as you might suspect, extremely low at this point. The last report that we received basically showed that from March through June, the transient guest tax, which is the hotel tax, the bed tax, was down 57% over that period of time. So not a surprise, as people aren't traveling. The Royals don't have anyone in their stadiums, things of that nature. So it's not that it was a surprise, but we certainly have to adjust from a budget aspect and hold back on some of the activities that money supported. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. All right, let's talk about ESF 6. So that stands for Emergency Support Function 6, which is part of our EOC, or the Emergency Operations Center. We talked about this during our last meeting, so I won't go into detail as to everything that's under that umbrella. But that is a role that your Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department has been serving in since the pandemic hit. And we are continuing to do that in a couple of different areas. We are still helping with food distribution helping to coordinate those efforts. I will tell you that in June, staff assisted Volunteer KC with distributing over 80 tons of the USDA produce and dairy to over 4,000 families. And that food was totaled at being valued at just under $125,000. That was a program through the federal government, through the USDA. And we were lucky enough that Volunteer KC chose Independence to distribute food on 4 different occasions, 4 different weeks in a row. And we helped coordinate that whole program, did the logistics for it, and then assisted them with handing that out. So that program, go ahead, Roger.
Eric, how many families? I'm curious. I missed it.
A little over 4,000 families.
All right, thank you.
The program, we are waiting to see if the Kansas City region is going to be afforded that program again. We'll find that out on August the 24th, I think it is. And then if it is in fact given back to this area, then we will work with Volunteer KC again. They've already reached out to us to do food distribution in September, very similar to what we did in June. So we are starting those plans and locations for that food distribution now. We also recently, just last Thursday, helped Jackson County with the coordination and logistics for the mask giveaway that we had at the Cable Dahmer Arena. Almost said Silverstein, Cable Dahmer Arena. And they gave away close to 15,000 masks for that particular event as well. So we are continuing to do some of that outreach. We are also have been put on notice that we may be asked once again to be a donation site for PPE, which regionally is in short supply. The school districts are short of some PPE for their needs going into the school season. The city is a little short as well for some of the needs that have been coming in through the ESF 6 and people making requests, different organizations, things of that nature that are also in need. So there may very well be a call for donations for PPE, in particular masks, and possibly disinfecting wipes and things of that nature. And we will more than likely, if that happens, we will be a receiving site for that and then handle the distribution as well. More than likely, if called upon, we will use the Palmer Senior Center for that activity since it's closed at this point. So the gym would make a nice warehousing space to receive those items, similar to what the Sermon Center, the role it played earlier on in the pandemic.
So the schools, what kind of PPE are they providing the teachers? You mentioned wipes and masks. So I'm guessing not fields.
Yeah, I'm not sure in total, but masks and wipes were in particular 2 of the things that were being called for, but I don't know from if they're doing gloves and things of that nature, face shields, etc. Gosh, I'm not sure. We'll see when the donation calls come in, what we're being asked to receive. Okay. All right, so any other questions with ESF 6? And I'll also say that's also put a little bit of strain on resources for both the parks and the recreation staff. So just remember, as they're opening things back up and managing those facilities and trying to cover for the hours of operation that we have, because quite frankly, we had a number of CAs that weren't comfortable coming back yet either, their center attendants. So we've had to fill in those positions with full-time staff as well, just to maintain operations. So, and everything we're doing out in the park. So beyond those things, we're also having to pull staff to assist with all of those different activities that we talked about through ESF 6 as well. So it has been a very trying and busy time for sure. But staff's just doing a great job. They're working really hard.
And I'm guessing you're using volunteers to help with the distribution. And where do those volunteers come from?
Yeah, we're using two sets of volunteers really at this point, from a wayfinding, traffic control, and general setup scenario, we're using the Emergency Operations Center's volunteer staff. They're specifically trained in traffic control and things of that nature, so that comes in really handy. And then for the food distribution itself, so physically unloading the trucks, loading the cars, and sending folks on their way, we're using a group called Volunteer KC to do that. And then in addition, we have some ancillary volunteers that came to us through the ESF 6 volunteer call for volunteers. There's a coordinating task force for volunteers there as well. So for example, all 15,000 of those masks, well, they came in giant boxes, but we were handing them out 10 at a time. So all of those masks had to be repackaged into plastic bags of 10 each. So the ESF 6 supplied volunteers to do that function for us. So it's really reaching out all over the place.
And I'm asking because I haven't seen any requests for volunteers for any of those kinds of things. And maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but I'm just wondering how far and wide that request is going.
Yeah, so far it's going through those channels, and we've been able to secure enough helping hands to pull this off. So the other part of that, and I alluded to a little bit when I talked about the EOC volunteers, some of those tasks do require a little bit of training, especially training kind of folks that have been prepped up in our volunteer program to be able to perform some of those tasks. So we rely pretty heavily on some of the pre-work that's been done for years in preparation for emergency situations to secure that assistance.
Eric, I have a slightly related question. I see that the CARES Act money that the governor flagged for tourism is not eligible for, masks and other things like that. But are you going to apply for that, or is that what they call a direct or a marketing a marketing organization? Is that something that you would be involved in trying to procure some of that funding for tourism, or is that more like an outside organization? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's part of that is us. We only qualify for a certain segment of that, and you hit on it, which was the marketing co-op. Right now, we have received $59,000 through that program. We are petitioning for more. So we'll see how that goes. Again, there was 15 million that was made available, and so far we've received 59,000. That money is being programmed out through our agency, our marketing agency, which is Madden Media, to basically do a cost share for some of the promotions and advertising that we're doing, or will be doing here later this summer and in the fall, and really in preparation for next tourism season.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if there aren't any other questions there, let's go to some budget discussion. So the first thing we'll do is look at our ending position for 1920. So in essence, this is our fourth quarter report to you. Tamara, if you can make that a little larger, that would be great for the group. There you go. Thanks. Okay, so obviously this was a really interesting budget year. So going into the fourth quarter, that is really when the state of emergency was called in March, and budgets and facilities were brought to a screeching halt. We literally reduced our operating cost by $1 million in that last quarter. So keep in mind that our overall operating budget was just around 8 million, a little less. So we had to come up with $1 million of that in the fourth quarter of an operating year. And obviously, when you get to that point, most of that money had been spent at that point. So that resulted in having to do things like keep the recreation facilities closed all the way through the fiscal year. Technically, recreation centers, gymnasiums, workout facilities, things of that nature were allowed to open in June. But for budgetary reasons, we had to delay that opening for us until July 1, just so that we could come up with that amount of money. So but for line by line, like we go through this with you guys each particular quarter, let's talk about each of the areas of the budget that we had, and we'll figure out where the bottom line was here. So in Parks Administration, we overspent by 12% there, and that was due to some retiree health insurance premiums that were previously paid by non-departmental accounts. That was all reorganized. Again, this was general fund at the time, so it was coming out of a different general fund account, was later applied to our budget after the budget was adopted, so this was unbudgeted money. It was brought into the cost centers that were actually bearing those costs. So from a tracking perspective, that certainly makes sense, but it did cause us to go 12% over for the year in administration. Parks Administration was pretty much right on target. I will say, as we're going through this, keep in mind that parks maintenance never stopped. The budget was reduced some in some areas, but the parks maintenance activities never stopped. So you're going to see some numbers for parks facilities that are pretty typical to what we would have had anyway. That's not where we took the majority of the money, saved the majority of the money to come up with that $1 million. So turf and facilities at 91%, 9% under due to the cancellation of some of those contracts that Mike was talking about. So we did save a little bit of money there. In 6013, that's the cemetery, 69% there. We did have some vacant positions that we held really throughout the fiscal year. It took a little time to get some people on staff, and then we had some people transfer into other positions, and then we held those obviously with the COVID scenario so that we could make the bottom line. 6021, that's the Recreation Administration. Simply saved a little money on some operating accounts there within that to shave a few dollars. 6022, Senior Services. Thank you, Morris. Whoops, a little far. There we go. Cost expenditures are 31% under target for this reporting period due to general fund budget reductions. So one, we closed the center, and two, we moved some of those activities that were still needing to be funded over to the sales tax, and we'll cover that here in a little bit as well. So quite a bit of savings in that particular cost center. The Roger T. Sermon Center, obviously we had some savings there for the fact that we closed the facility in March. George Owens, same type of scenario there. We also held some of the programming, canceled some of the programs or delayed those programs from taking place, which saved us a little bit of money. We were 16% under target there. 16% under target for the Wellness Administration Work Group as well. We had some facility closures obviously in March, but we also pretty much stopped most of the programming temporarily there and moved a lot of it online. So that's the general fund. Then let's go to sales tax cost centers. So 6041, that's your park maintenance and security inspection. Also does a lot of the general work out on the cleaning the restrooms and the shelters and things of that nature, making minor repairs. 4% under, which is pretty typical for the year. Truman Memorial Building, we were only at 81% expended there, obviously because we closed the building in March and deferred any of the programs and facility rentals that were going to take place during that time. Palmer Senior Center, this is really what funds the operations of the center. The other fund that you saw really was the meal program and the Mid-America Regional supported part of the operations. This is the gymnasium, it's all the center attendance, it's the fitness areas, and a lot of the programming that took place there. So obviously with the facility closed, as of March, some of that money was saved, and we only expended 72% of the allocated budget for the Palmer Senior Center. Okay, the family programs area, we were 20% below, and we did have some vacancies that we held open for center attendance. We canceled all of our programs for the spring season, and we also had the DeWitt Center closed from March through the end of June. The water park, that facility did not open for the summer season, but it was still expended to the tune of about 47% because that facility crosses fiscal years. So a fiscal year actually funds the operations July through the closing, and then again for the opening of the facility in that next spring. That's all in one fiscal year, even though the season crosses. So we had expenses related to the closing, to the July and August operations in the previous year, but we saved money because we did not expend anything in the spring to reopen it. So this next fiscal year going in, we will have saved the money from the July and August operations, but we'll be expending money again to open the facility for the 2021 season in May. So hopefully that makes sense. Sports administration, it was 27% below target for ordinary expenditures for this reporting season for a couple of different reasons. We did have some positions that we held back on, seasonals, things of that nature. We also did receive a substantial refund back. We had some metering issues for our sewer charges out there. We put some flow meters in, and that was showing us that we were paying sewage fees on all the irrigation, and that's not typically what you would spend sewage fees on. It's not on the consumption of water in total. It's the consumption of water for certain uses. Irrigation is outside of that. If you have a flow meter that can measure that for us, we did. We calculated that back, and we received something like $70,000 back as a result of some overbilling. So that was a nice get. And then, of course, we saved money as we didn't have any youth or adult programming happening at any of the ball field complexes through, well, all spring and until this coming up fall, actually. Okay, the Uptown Market, again, it was closed for a little while, but we also saved a little money when Becca left, and it took us a little time to fill that position back. Becca went to join her family in a mountainous state up to our northwest, and she's doing wonderful, which we knew she would. We miss her dearly, but we're happy that she went and followed her family up there. Her husband got a transfer, and she found some nice positions. So we miss her dearly, but we do have a person that is stepping into her shoes and filling some programming needs now. But for a little while, we were dark at the market, resulting in some savings there at the end of the year. All right, we also have the Sermon Center operations in the sales tax. That one is essentially appropriate for this reporting period. Again, we had shifted a lot of the things that we were doing from an operational standpoint over to the park sales tax. The salary savings, the savings that we had relative to the Sermon Center really were in the center attendance. Those were the ones that were in the other cost center. This is all the electricity and things of that nature, and we were still operating the Sermon Center on a day-to-day basis as the donation site. So all of those costs were still there. So it's not as though the building was vacant, it was repurposed. So the money that we saved really was in the staffing costs associated with the day-to-day operations. Okay, so bottom line then, our general fund was 90% expended. Sales tax fund, 81% expended. Total department for Parks and Recreation general fund and sales tax was 84% expended. So the budget that we went into the year with was almost 5.8, and we spent the 4.8. So there's your $1 million savings in the fourth quarter. Okay, questions on that? All right, thanks for letting me go through that with you. Let's jump on now to the next thing on the agenda, which is looking at next year's or this current year's budget.
Morris, do you want me to go ahead and share it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Morris developed this spreadsheet for us. This is a little different form than what you all are used to looking at, but because of the fluctuations in revenues and expenses, given the current situation that we're in, we tried to show this in a little bit different way. We also wanted to point out that this fiscal year, starting this fiscal year, we're no longer in the general fund. We are in the newly established health and recreation levy, specifically the recreation portion of the levy. That is a property tax that has been around forever, but it has been just rolled into the general fund and not really designated out separately until this fiscal year. Actually, I take that back. Many years ago, it was separated, was brought back into one collective at one point in time, and now we're splitting that back out as the competition for general fund dollars is becoming more and more. Quite frankly, Parks and Recreation was battling against some of the emergency services for dollars as their needs grew as well, which is completely understandable. And those are some priority needs for any city, for sure. So just to make sure that we were going to maintain what the recreation levy was generating, we decided to break that out and basically break us away from that general fund pool and place us just specific into the recreation levy so that our dollars are appropriately accounted for. Okay, so we have, Morris, you want to walk us through just in general what the spreadsheet is, and then we can start going through it a little bit.
Sure. So basically what you have, as Eric was talking about, you've got the health and recreation levy, former general fund accounts listed. So you have revenue on top. So we're specifically showing this first line item here, general/HR health and recreation levy. So 18-19 actuals and the 19-20 actuals, those are general fund dollars. And the current year, as Eric alluded to, July 1, that's actually health and recreation levy funds, the 1.7. Then we show other revenue sources that we have. We split out the cemetery just to show that. That's quite a significant amount. And then total revenues are listed out there for the last 2 years actual, and then the current year approved budget. And then, so then scrolling down the page, you can see, so these are the previous account numbers. 6001 was a general fund account, 6071. For accounting purposes, they have to switch those up since it's a different funding source. So that's why the two cost center numbers are represented there. But again, shows 18-19 actual expense last year ending June 30, 19-20 actual expense, and then current year approved adopted budget for this year for total operations cost. So everything down to this point is in the now health and recreation levy. And then scrolling down, or go ahead.
I tell you what, Morris, in the interest of time, hold it right there so that we get a picture of revenues and expenses just for the general funds / recreation levy. So one thing I wanted to point out here was you can see the decrease in overall revenue that we were receiving from the general fund over the first two columns there, the 2.7 million, the 2.2 million, and now being on our own, where that health and recreation levy, plus some of the other revenues that we're bringing in, is just over 2 million. So that's a pretty significant drop in overall revenue to support our operations. Now, what I want to point out is we are at this point budgeted for this next fiscal year for full operations. So you'll see down under total operations, we went from 2.1 down to about 1.8 or 1.794. Again, that was with some of the COVID reductions in mind. And then we're back up to 1.9. So we're going to be monitoring, obviously, how that revenue is coming in. That's a property tax, so it should be pretty steady, but we're still going to watch that very closely. And we're initially holding back on some things still within all of these cost centers to make sure that the revenue is going to flow in as we would expect it to. So, so the operating margin for the health and recreation levy is pretty thin. It's $2 million in, 1.9 out. So, so we're going to be keeping a very, very close eye on that. All right, Morris, if you wouldn't mind going down to the sales tax then.
Sure, and I'll try to run through this quickly. So again, the same format, just again, this is Parks and Recreation sales tax. So you have the revenue for the park sales tax itself specifically shown there. So you can see these are last 2 years actual, so 18-19 and 19-20. So again, ending June 30th, and then this is current year adopted budget, 4.014 million. Other revenue associated, so program fees, rental fees, et cetera, interest on some of this funding for total revenue listed here. So again, you can see a fairly significant drop between 2 fiscal years ago, last fiscal year and the current projected fiscal year. So, and then listed out here again, these operating accounts, so 6041 through 6048, which were shown in the previous report. So these are actual expenses in these first two columns, and then the last column is adopted budget for then showing a total operations cost for Parks and Rec sales tax.
So for those, oh, I'm sorry, leave it right there for a minute, Morris. Thank you. So for those, I think some of the takeaways from the sales tax revenue, really it is the sales tax itself is presently holding rather steady. So people are still out purchasing, spending money. Certainly the use tax that we get from Amazon purchases and things of that nature has helped shore that up. So that remains for the moment pretty steady, but we are being a little cautious in that if the stimulus check scenario doesn't come back, if there's not another stimulus check, if the unemployment benefits decrease from what the stimulus package had previously afforded, then we very well might see a drop in purchases and related sales tax. So again, the numbers are pretty steady, but we're being very cautious and watching those things honestly almost daily on how that sales tax revenue is coming in. The other revenues are down significantly because of the water park. You know, the water park generates between $400,000 and $500,000 a year in revenue. So you're looking at split seasons at this point. We didn't collect any money this year. We're going to be collecting money as we go into the next pool season. But that's really the reason for the large drop in revenue there. And then from the expense side, again, we are budgeted for full bore operations, but we are not proceeding with that at this point in time. We're being very cautious. As Mike indicated earlier, we're bringing some contractors back, but it's on a limited basis. It certainly is not at the full scale that we would have normally brought contractors on board. Same thing with seasonals. We have a few, but we have a lot of vacant positions there as well, and we're just holding off on those and watching the trends to see where this ends up. We're also holding on all capital at this point. We have very, very little capital programmed in our spreadsheets and our cash flow analysis. Again, until we get a handle on where this is really going to go. So there is your capital lines right there. So Morris, you're in charge of capital around here. Why don't you talk us through that, please?
Sure. So, so again, here's the capital account. So park revitalization, that's kind of the general fix-its account. So a lot of small purchases are kind of rolled up into those, but park maintenance mobile equipment, so that's replacement of equipment, mowers, trucks, etc. Obviously, those pieces of equipment have a useful life and then they have to be replaced. We also have a separate account for trails maintenance or improvements, athletic fields and courts, specific account for AO, Adventure Oasis, and then playgrounds, spray grounds, and then George Owens Nature Park improvements. So these again are showing, this first column is 18-19 actual expenses. So the previous fiscal year or 2 fiscal years ago, this is 19-20. So just ending just a month or so ago, June 30. These are actual expenses, and then these are what is included in the adopted budget for this fiscal year. So you can see the trend there dropping off rather significantly.
So that probably is one of the big stories of the budget, guys, is, you know, we talked a lot in previous meetings over the years about our capital program, the CIP, what it entailed and how that dovetailed straight from our master plan, and it got so detailed as going through what fiscal year, what playground was going to be replaced, etc. All of that is temporarily on hold until we find out exactly what kind of revenue we're going to have coming in here over the course of the next year, and then try to project that out from there. There's just so many unknowns. So with that said, we're holding back on that and taking, unfortunately, a fix it when it breaks kind of attitude, and that's not where any of us want to be. But it's prudent, it's cautious until we find out how our revenue streams are actually going to flow in.
And I might.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, if I could, Eric, sorry to interrupt. I might just add too. So this seems like a significant drop, but even, I want to make sure you understand, even this $825,000 amount is really a drop in the bucket to the $35 million of projects that are unfunded at this point. So even spending almost, you know, over $750,000, that doesn't even really address the long-term capital needs for our department. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Morris. It's very true. Okay, that takes us to transient gas tax. So the spreadsheet is laid out in the same way as the others are, of course, but there's an asterisk by the revenue, and I'll explain why. So generally speaking, each year the transient gas tax, the bed tax, brings in about $2 million a year, and the expenditures pretty much meet those revenues on an annual basis. So the transient gas tax funds a couple different work groups or activity areas within the tourism division. The first is sales and services. So that is the part of the operation that is running the visitor center, doing all the marketing, doing all the advertising, going to the trade shows, talking with the tour groups, working with them and securing them to get into our hotels, hold different conferences here, or making sure that if there is something large coming into Kansas City, we are on their radar as being an ancillary activity to whatever it is they might be in town to do. It's also working very closely, quite frankly, with the Royals and the Chiefs. They are ordinarily a huge driver of hotel nights within our city and support our hotels and lodging establishments throughout town. So the other part of the operation under the tourism division is the historic sites and the National Frontier Trails Museum. So this fund also covers the operational costs associated with the city-owned sites. So with that said, when COVID hit, our revenue took a little bit of a hit. It went down. It went from basically the 2 million to the 1.5 million. So we lost about $500,000 right off the bat from fewer hotel stays, and our admissions revenue, as you can see, dropped as well. So I will tell you that this budget was built prior to knowing any of the trends or what was going to happen. It was actually built before the pandemic officially even hit. So the budget right now shows a typical revenue scenario and a typical operating scenario for the transient guest tax. We just recently got our revenue figures in for the close of June. Now there's still some things coming in, so it's not exact, but it appears that the transient guest tax from March through June was down some 57%, as I think I said earlier. So that number, even though it shows the 1.9, we're going to amend the tourism budget here within the next couple of weeks to match up with the revenue trend that we currently see. So for the next meeting, you all will see an amended budget in place of what we have here. The National Frontier Trails Museum is closed at the moment, as are our historic sites, as I mentioned earlier. So we're working through that process right now. We are still out. Obviously, the sales and services team is doing their work. We're building for the future for when the pandemic is over and people are wanting to get back out and do things, especially the national tourism industry experts are telling us day trips or short weekend trips are going to be huge at first when everyone is comfortable getting back out and traveling again. We are certainly within a day trip drive of a huge population of the United States, and our marketing is for the next upcoming spring season is focusing on that demographic and that zone, if you will. So they are hard at work at putting those plans together and getting those materials out. So from a capital perspective, there are some knowns here. We still have $75,000 that we're putting in, and we will expend for small fix-its with the historic sites. We still have to maintain them. And the Truman Depot project is still underway. Again, as a reminder, we have a $350,000 grant through MoDOT Transportation Enhancement Grant to restore the depot. Plans on that are finalized, and we're getting ready to go out to bid. The $89,000 and then the $80,000 you see there in those two columns are essentially our match in support of that program, of that grant program. It was an 80-20, I think it was. So we did have to expend some dollars to secure that grant, and that's what you see there. Okay, so from a total bottom line scenario, Morris, if you go down to the highlighted area. So our year-end position for 18-19, we actually ended as a department $1.7 million to the good. And this last fiscal year that we're just finishing up, we were able to be 1.1, almost $1.2 million to the good, and that was quite a feat with what we were faced with going into that fourth quarter. Staff just did an amazing job of essentially shutting things down and then transitioning while still saving money so that we would make our bottom lines. So we're pretty proud of what we've done there. This next fiscal year going in is pretty thin. We're only looking at a surplus of $406,000. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the budget assumes full bore operations on everything that we do, and we certainly know that that's not going to be the case. We will be monitoring that and only releasing new initiatives or filling positions that might be vacant right now when we're comfortable doing so and we know that the revenue is going to be coming in. Okay, that was a whole lot of talking. So I'll open it up to questions. Okay, well, hearing none, it's not rosy, but our nose is still above water, guys. And we're gonna be okay. We're gonna make it through. It's gonna be a rough year, but we'll keep it rolling.
Eric, it's Roger. Speak to your staff situation a little bit, both from a budgeting point of view, but also from a morale and hang in there point of view, I hope.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on, unless you're going to do it later in the reports.
Yeah, no, we can speak to it now. So from a staffing perspective, we're starting to bring some of our part-time staff back now that the facilities are open, but we're not fully staffed there by any means. And we just filled one of the park staff vacancies. So I believe we are back to full staff from a full-time perspective for parks. But we are many FTEs down on part-timers and contract labor, as we've talked about a couple of times here. So we're pretty short there. From a recreation standpoint, we are 3 or 4 positions, full-time positions down at this point, and we're not fully staffed back with all of our part-time folks either. From a tourism perspective, essentially all of the National Frontier Trails Museum staff positions are vacant, with the exception of 2. So there are 4 vacancies plus your seasonals, your center attendants or your museum attendants. Fortunately, those positions were vacant going into the pandemic. So we didn't have to let anyone go as a result of this. It was simply holding positions that were already vacant. So that's it from an overall staffing level. We're short for sure. From a morale perspective, it's tough. We just had a discussion with at an all staff meeting we just had earlier this week. Folks are tired. There's no doubt about it. They are working overtime. They are pulling duties outside of their regular job descriptions, and doing whatever it takes to get through the day, honestly, because things change daily on what the response is, what the rules are. Every time there's a rule change, then there's a policy change, and the policy change means there's a facility operations change, which they have to work through and then implement and then get advertised, and it is a constant flow of information and action. From a patron standpoint, we've had a lot of people that have been really nice and are virtually patting us on the back and telling us to keep going. But we've had our fair share of folks that aren't, for sure. And the message is, guys, don't take things personally. People are frustrated, not necessarily with the work that you're doing, but just with this whole pandemic scenario as a whole. People are upset that they got to wear masks. People are upset that they can't get on the playgrounds, etc. They're upset that the parks aren't mowed as frequently as it was in previous years. And when we are mowing, it's tall, so it's leaving windrows. There's a lot of negative comments that are coming back to us at this point. But again, it's a lot of just in general frustration. It's not really geared towards any of us in particular, which is good. I keep trying to remind the staff that. I tell them that, frankly, stay off the social media if you can, and just know that we know that they are doing everything that they possibly can to get the job done on a day-to-day basis, and we appreciate their work, and just hang in there, and don't take it personally.
I think you should assuming everybody agrees with me, but I think you should let them know that we ask about these things, we're concerned about them, and we're pleased that they're meeting management's expectations under tough circumstances.
I will certainly do that, Roger. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you. And that message also does come from our city management as well, and we passed that on. We just did that the other day. So So you know, the good thing is, and we've got a really good group of folks. We're pretty tight. We can vent to each other and pick each other up, and you know, that goes a long way. So our work culture, luckily going into this, was really positive. So that certainly helped us through.
How's the relationship with the council? Are you hearing from them? You or your people hearing from them directly? Because usually when voters and residents get unhappy, they call their councilman, and then the councilman calls you in this case, or somebody over there. If it's the water department, they call and rag them too. So what are you getting out of the council itself?
Yeah, I mean, there are some complaints that are coming through. Most of them are coming either through the city manager's office or through the mayor's office through her assistant, and she always CCs you know, the city management when things come through. So yeah, we're not being directed by the council or anyone to do anything specific or things of that nature. It's really more communication down and letting us know what folks are saying or what an issue might be, and that's appropriate. That's okay.
Thank you.
Eric, at this point, did you want to move on to discussion of the meeting schedule for fiscal year 2021?
Yeah, I've certainly turned it back over to you, and don't forget to go back up and approve the minutes.
Absolutely. At the bottom of the agenda, you can see the dates for the next 3 meetings, November 5th, February 4th, and May 6th. Does anybody have any questions about those dates or concerns, or is that something we can pencil in? And I guess my only question would be, is this 4:15 time? Is this something that we're hoping to continue, or would we revert back to more of an evening meeting time?
I think that largely may revolve around the employed members of the commission. You know, for me, it's fine. I just maybe preferable, but I'm having served on here for a long time. I know that people who are working for a living still don't, you know, they may not have the flexibility during the workday, and they may need us to work, you know, later, you know, meet later. So I'm fine with it, but I'm open to concerns if there are any by our employed members.
Yeah, I agree. I teach high school, so I'm typically out and available by that time, by 4:15. But if there are others who have those concerns, we could certainly push it back. If that's okay with the Parks and Rec staff. Does anybody have any concerns about that meeting time? And I suppose we could, you know, establish the actual meeting time closer to when those dates approach and see if there are any conflicts. Does anybody have any conflicts with the dates themselves if you have your calendars available?
Just speaking for me, you know, we're home all the time anymore, so it's, you know, I don't know of anything that far ahead that would be a problem. That's Roger.
It works for me. The time is good, 4:15, and the dates are fine.
Okay. Well, just let us know if anything does come up, and maybe Tamara, if we get closer to the meeting time and people can't do the 4:15, we could reschedule or, you know, push back the meeting time as it approaches that date.
Okay. Would you all prefer that I go ahead and send out, just predicting that we'll probably still be socially distancing and staying on a virtual meeting platform? Would you like for me to go ahead and send out appointments for those dates with meeting times starting at 4:15, and then we can adjust later if needed? Or do you want to hold off till closer to each date?
I don't want to speak for everyone, but I get those on my calendar right when you send them out. I kind of just accept that, and it goes into my Google Calendar. So I'm fine with you sending them out at your convenience.
Can you do both now and then too? Is that reasonable to ask?
Typically what I do is send out the appointments, which go to your calendar, and it will have the meeting link in it. And then closer, within a week or so before each meeting, I send out an email with the previous meeting minutes and that meeting's agenda as kind of a reminder that it's coming up. So,
Okay.
so yeah, you would have a heads up. And is Sean still on the line with us? I don't know if he wanted to speak up and say if 4:15 works for him.
Yeah, I'm still here. 4:15 would work perfect for me.
Okay, great. Well, we'll go with 4:15, and I'll go ahead and send out appointments for those next 3 dates. And if anything between now and then changes, of course, we'll definitely be in communication with you all.
Thanks, Tamara. I appreciate that, and I always appreciate your communication. It's very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Did everybody have a chance to look at the previous meeting minutes or have any questions about those? If not, someone could move to approve those.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, so it sounds like those meeting minutes are approved. Is there any old business that needs to be addressed? Any new business? Well, I think are we sliding in under time here, Eric? Does this?
Yes, sir.
All right.
We're open-ended, so you got 3 minutes if you want to tell us a story.
Oh, amazing.
Eric, it's Roger again. Is there anything that we can do that, you know, obviously some of us at least are closeted at home, but is there anything that we can do to make your job and the staff job easier?
Yeah, at this point, we appreciate what you've already said, Roger. The support is great, and go shopping. Spend some money. Let's get some sales tax in here.
Yeah, support our schools, support our city. Yeah, local shop local. Absolutely. And you mentioned Amazon earlier. If people shop at a store that has an anchor business here, a physical presence, that's more helpful. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So
if
there
you
is
do your online shopping at Target or Walmart, for instance, that we get more sales tax money.
Yes.
That way.
Yeah, you will pay local taxes on that. So, and there is some movement afoot in Jefferson City on the Wayfair bill. It's very early, but it's being discussed, and that is currently not a local sales tax business. So it has been passed in a couple of states, and Missouri is at least exploring that opportunity as well, which would continue to help our bottom line.
All right. Well, it sounds like this meeting can be adjourned.
I believe it can, sir. Yes, sir.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll just say it is. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye now.